actually think that if we actually get a vote on these substantive bills, we're going to see some really weird vote totals because some Democrats won't vote for Israel and some will vote for Ukraine. And then there's the TikTok bill that also has maybe some border provisions in it. Like, there are a lot of different things being lumped into this that could come up with some pretty strange ways of bipartisan pairing. At the end of the day, isn't that how this place should work? But it's not. I mean, that's the utopia, right?
Yeah, I know. That sounds very Bulwarky, actually. Like, oh my, holy cow, we could get some
Look at me knowing my
bipartisan
audience.
foreign aid passed. Hello and welcome to the Bulwark Podcast. It's Thursday, April 18th. I'm delighted to be here with my pal Vitali, Capitol Hill correspondent for NBC News. My favorite person, one of my favorite. Let's not overdo it. One of my favorite people.
person was just fine.
One of my favorite people to be on MSNBC with, author of Electable: Why America Hasn't Put a Woman in the White House Yet. Obviously, Allie is here to discuss the craziness on the Hill and maybe just a hint of sanity on the Hill, actually, from the Republicans. But before we do that, because you've written that book, I'm just kind of dying to ask you about Vice President Harris in the context of the book. I'd argue, like, we can stipulate that she's had some political struggles. I'd argue that some of that's her own mistake. Some of that's the nature of being VP. They made a satire out of Veep for a reason, but some is obviously succumbing to the misogynist tropes that have bedeviled other women politicians. So you studied this, you looked at Geraldine Ferraro, you went deep. So I'm just curious what your take is on how Kamala has navigated all that.
Well, Tim, this is my first time on the pod, but I'm definitely coming back because you just said I was your favorite of all the people you ever have done television with. Is that what I heard correctly?
Well, one of my favorites. Sometimes I can buff it up a guest a little bit. You know, I'm new to the host game. I want people to come back.
We love that. So you have me now on the hook.
Great.
Look, when it comes to Kamala Harris, I think that, and I write this in the book, like, she is subject to both the fair and unfair. Her allies would tell you that most of it is unfair. Her critics would tell you that all of it's fair. I actually fall somewhere in the middle right alongside of you, which is that as a politician, you got to deal in the world that you live in. And you can't wave a magic wand and make people not still fall prey to misogyny and racism. You can call it out, and certainly that's the ecosystem that I hope that we're living in more. But I think that this last phase of the administration, the last 2 years, and going into an election year are really Kamala Harris's chance at redemption, in large part because abortion is such a front and center issue. And we watch the ways that Joe Biden has been willing to talk about it, but he is more reluctant to dive in on this issue, in large part because of his background. Vice President Harris has been very outspoken. She has gone to the center of these states in Florida, in Arizona, immediately after those news cycles on whatever abortion restrictions were passed. That's a really motivating issue for the electorate. It's important to have a woman, and a Black woman at that, talking about that issue at this moment. And I do think that because she's at the forefront of that, it is an opportunity for her to be seen as a passionate advocate on a policy that she's comfortable about. And that's really going to be important when we write the legacy of the first female vice president.
I'd add one more thing to that. I agree with all that. I'd like to see her back in that prosecutor role this year, prosecuting the case against Trump aggressively. Biden is pretty good at that, but, you know, he's lost a step, and she could really take that. I think that she's been a little reluctant to be the attack dog, but I don't know. In some ways, I'm curious your view on this. Being more aggressive might help overcompensate for some of those unfair implicit biases a little bit too, and I think it plays to her strengths a little bit.
It might, but also, and I again write this in the book, is like, vice presidents are not supposed to overshadow the boss.
True.
Biden's actually an example of what not to do when you look at the ways that he overstepped Obama on a variety of different issues, including but not limited to gay marriage, and the ways that he made news around Obamacare and other things like that. You're not supposed to do that if you're being a good vice president. Every former aide that I talked to who worked in a vice presidential office was like, the job is to ride the coattails and amplify the message. If she were stepping out in front, what's the thing that we would be hearing consistently? Oh, she's too ambitious. Oh, she's trying to get ahead. Those are unfair misogynist tropes to begin with. But yes, I do think there's an opportunity for her, especially in a vice presidential debate. And I put that with an asterisk because, like, I don't know if we're getting debates this time. But if we do, what an opportunity, because we watched what she did with former Vice President Mike Pence, although the fly certainly played its own role too. But I do think that if it's someone like Tim Scott or Elise Stefanik or Kristi Noem, that's a fascinating dynamic to watch in a debate stage.
For sure. And maybe the expectations game might play to our benefit there. Okay. Wait, I want to get to the Hill, but where are you right now for our YouTube viewers? You have fake books there. There's a flag. What is happening? Where are you right now?
I look like I'm some mix of like a lawmaker with the flags, but no, I just found a closet in our area on the Hill where reporters dwell, our little lairs. So this is one of the nicer lairs. I dressed it up for you.
The Capitol Hill closet. It looks really great. Okay. So Mike Johnson has found Jesus on Ukraine. And kind of shocking. And so I don't want to be Lucy with a football. We'll see. We're taping this. The Rules Committee is about to meet here as we're taping this. So we'll kind of know more, I guess, by the time this publishes. But it seems like Mike Johnson is willing to take one for the team, maybe take one for his speakership on this. Let's listen to what he said at a press conference yesterday on the Ukraine funding bill.
Why are you willing to risk losing your job over this Ukraine funding?
Listen, my philosophy is you do the right thing and you let the chips fall where they may. If I operated out of fear over a motion to vacate, I would never be able to do my job. Look, history judges us for what we do. This is a critical time right now, a critical time on the world stage. I could make a selfish decision and do something that's different, but I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. I think providing lethal aid to Ukraine right now is critically important. I really do. I really do believe the intel and the briefings that we've gotten that I believe Xi and Vladimir Putin and Iran really are an axis of evil. I think they're in coordination on this. I think that Vladimir Putin would continue to march through Europe if he were allowed. I think he might go to the Balkans next. I think he might have a showdown with Poland or one of our NATO allies. To put it bluntly, I would rather send bullets to Ukraine than American boys. My son is going to begin in the Naval Academy this fall. This is a live fire exercise for me, as it is so many American families. This is not a game. It's not a joke. We can't play politics of this. We have to do the right thing. And I'm going to allow an opportunity for every single member of the House to vote their conscience and their will on this. And I think that's the way this institution is supposed to work. And I'm willing to take personal risk for that because we have to do the right thing, and history will judge us.
That's a change of tune, Allie. I mean, you've been over there, you've been following this more than me, but I haven't heard Mike Johnson sound like this in the time that he's been speaker.
I think that's right. I mean, he definitely sounds different than he did as just Congressman Mike Johnson.
Sure. Now
that he's in the role of speaker, though, I do think this is the first time that he's really speaking explicitly to the stakes of this moment. I mean, even calling himself earlier this week a wartime speaker, it was real escalation in rhetoric.
A little eye rolly.
But and I take that point. I agree with you. However, I do think that it also speaks to this moment and why we might be seeing a pivot from him. Whether or not it costs him his job, I don't know. I guess we'll see. I just talked to him, minutes ago when they opened the House floor, and I asked, are you trying to change the rules around a motion to vacate? And he sort of downplayed the idea, being like, we're focused on the supplemental right now. I don't know if that's the right way to take it, given the fact that Marjorie Taylor Greene says she's not going to privilege her resolution until after this foreign aid supplemental vote on Saturday. So we'll see. Maybe he waits too long and he ends up being motion to vacated. Maybe he gets McCarthy before he can change these rules. I don't know, but the rules are going to have to be changed at some point, because however this plays out, you can't keep governing. That's what you want to call this rigmarole that we've been in lately. You can't keep doing that with the rules as they are right now. That's not sustainable.
Yeah. I want to hear more about the reaction from the crazies, but just really quick on Mike Johnson. Here's one thing that he said. I just want to read the sentence. I can make a selfish decision and do something that's different, but I'm doing here what I believe to be the right thing. That right thing being making sure that these aid supplementals get up for a vote. He really could have kind of blamed the crazy caucus, right? And sort of done the hemming, hawing, and I think we should do it, but I've got to defer to my right? Like, he probably could have gotten away with that, right? And he has set this up specifically so that Democrats are going to have to be the ones that help bail him out. And I saw this morning, I was looking at this, if they do get this to the floor and through the Rules Committee over the objections of Republicans, it'll be the first time since 95 since that has happened. And that didn't happen in 95. That's just when they started measuring this. So, like, it hasn't happened in recorded memory. That would be a pretty, I don't know, maybe overstated to call it brave, but bold move by Mike Johnson. No? I mean, out of character.
Well, I mean, he said he's hoping not to have to rely on Democrats to get the rule through. And, like, Here's the best way that I think about the rules, because I do get questions from people about this all the time, even people who are political junkies. Like, the House functions in a weird way. Basically, I think about the rule vote, both out of the committee and on the House floor, as like the bouncer that you have to pass through to actually get the vote on the bar, on the drinks in the bar, right?
Yeah.
Like,
is this like the Berlin Club, though? Is this like the Berlin Club where the bouncer just looks at your outfit and decides if you can get in?
No, I think this is a strict ID. You have to pass the test, yes or no. It is very strict here. But look, the fact that Democrats are even considering this, I think, speaks to why Johnson had to change his tactic in the first place. I am not someone who buys into the Hail Mary pass of discharge petitions. Democrats have tried this time and again, and they've never amounted to anything. But they had a discharge petition brewing on the Senate supplemental, which is basically what this is, except Johnson wants to do this piece by piece as opposed to voting on it all together. But they've had this brewing, and they've been asking explicitly this week in their Democratic caucus meetings, hey, use your personal relationships with Republicans, get them to sign on to this discharge petition, maybe because they have trust issues over whether or not this is actually going to come to the floor. And I have to say, there are Republicans who really, really want this vote. And I know we often talk about the hardline conservatives who are often the thorn in the side, but at some point, maybe, I don't know, moderates decide that they have just as much sway here and could have gone the other way.
Yeah, Mike Lawler and that. Again, so that's the interesting thing about this.
Lawler, McCall.
That Johnson hasn't forced them to do that, though. Right? Like, Johnson could have played this in a way that's like, you guys have to do that and over my dead body to help me survive. And if this comes up in a vote today, that's the interesting thing about the rules. Like, if it happens so that, who are the three? It's Norman, Roy, and I'm forgetting the third one, but Massey, Norman, Roy, and Massey that are on the Rules Committee. If the three Republicans and the Freedom Caucus sent out a letter that was like comparing Johnson to Boehner and Pelosi, that's not a winning place to be as a Republican speaker. So if those folks go against it, but the people you're talking about go for it, I had Moskowitz on the podcast. Moskowitz said he would help. If it turns out like that it happens, I mean, that's definitely interesting. I mean, it's a change of tactic that puts Johnson, I guess you hate to hand it to the Freedom Caucus, but that does make Johnson more kind of like Boehner than what we expected. No?
Yeah. I think that's right. I think Democrats think about him differently than they think about McCarthy.
Why
see it in the way.
Do you think?
I don't know. I think I'm trying to remember what Dan Kildee said this morning, but it was something to the effect of, like, he doesn't lie as much and he's a little bit less bad at the job. I don't know. Kildee said it much more funny than I ever would have. But I do think that there's a view that Johnson is someone that they can work with. There are some Democrats who I've spoken to who will offer the reminder that he is anti-LGBTQ, that he is anti a lot of the positions that progressives themselves espouse. But the people here who would call themselves, I think, institutionalists who want to see this place just function, the bar is so low now that they'll pretty much do anything to make that happen. So I actually think, look, in the world where people like us, or at least me, love to see what strange political bedfellows can be made on policy and politics, I actually think that if we actually get a vote on these substantive bills, we're going to see some really weird vote totals because some Democrats won't vote for Israel and some will vote for Ukraine. And then there's the TikTok bill that also has maybe some border provisions in it. Like, there are a lot of different things being lumped into this that could come up with some pretty strange ways of bipartisan pairing. At the end of the day, isn't that how this place should work? But it's not. I mean, that's the utopia, right?
Yeah, I know. That sounds very Bulwarky, actually. We're like, oh my, holy cow, we could get some
Look
bipartisan foreign aid passed. Wow, like things keep coming up Bulwark. Okay, just really quick on the crazies. My word, not yours. I wouldn't put it in your mouth. You're a reporter. You were over there during the McCarthy rigmarole and the gates, and we had all the votes, and like you can kind of sense the tension in the conference at that time. It's hard for me as an outsider, like, to see right now, is that tension bubbling up to the same level when you hear from the Roys and the Masseys and the Gateses, or is it a little bit performative? They feel like they have to say that they're against it, but they might let it slide. Like, how do you assess it?
I actually think this is a very individual by individual basis. Like, Massey is the only one of that crew that's come out and explicitly said, I'm going to go the route of motion to vacate. I could go that route. I would co-sponsor it. Roy and Norman are different in that they do not like this approach, and they have very powerful positions on rules that, frankly, several of their colleagues are calling for them to not have if they vote against this rule. So we'll keep an eye on that space. But they're not for, at least in my conversations with Ralph Norman, they're not for another motion to vacate and another cycle of just complete and total dysfunction. I think because everyone here recognizes, like, no one would get 218 or 216 if that's the magic number. No one is getting those votes. So, like, I don't even know where we would go. They were scraping the barrel for names the last time around at the end of the year when they were looking for Mike Johnson to ultimately get this job. So I don't even know where that would put us if they were to do this again. That's why I think a lot of people don't know if it's real. But when you talk about the emotional aspect of this, yes, there are people who are very angry. Is it at the fever pitch that it was last year at Matt Gaetz and the rest of the folks who voted to oust McCarthy? No, not yet. But I'm also someone who thinks it could easily get there if more people keep piecemeal adding to Marjorie Taylor Greene's effort.
Could get hot today. Ralph Norman's like got to be the most interesting guy on the Hill right now. He was at the January 6th, or helped organize the January 6th rally, endorsed Nikki Haley, and is now going anti-Mike Johnson on this. I say what you want about Ralph Norman, I guess. He does what he goes his own way. He marches to the beat of his own drummer.
Guy. I mean, look, I spent a lot of time with him when I was on the road with Nikki Haley because he was consistently out there. And I think on paper, for those of us who have watched him in Congress the last 2 years especially, it's like, what do you have to do with this woman who is sort of espousing like a different way of being a Republican, even if on policy she is in line with a lot of the things that this Trump era has brought us, certainly not on foreign policy, but like on a lot of the domestic issues, certainly she's there. But it always seemed like a mismatch. But again, South Carolina political roots go deep, and that's what that was about. And again, I think that Ralph Norman, while he might vote against this rule, the idea that any of these hardline conservatives were ever going to support this foreign aid package, however you chop it up, chunk it up, or put it together, is just wrong. Like, they were always going to have a problem with it, but they were also never going to vote for it.
Hey, JVL, it's been months since I've seen you without a screen intermediary. I'm just dying to lick your face and put my hands on you. And so are you going to come do some public events with us and be among the people?
Human contact? Yes. Yes, I'm going to do it. I'm coming out of the house. I'm leaving the basement for 2 days. May 1st in Philadelphia and May 15th in Washington, D.C.
This will be the first Bulwark event where we encourage jeering because it's Philly, people, so jeer us.
Yes.
May 1st.
If we have a bad show, I expect the Philly crowd to boo us.
Please. Or anyway, even if it's a good show, boo us anyway. We deserve it. May 1st in Philly, May 15th, 6 and I Synagogue in Washington, D.C. Come hang out. Go to thebulwark.com/events to get your tickets. Thebulwark.com/events. And JVL, I just can't wait to get all up on you. All right, last question. I'll let you go. What are you hearing from the Democrats on that weird fourth element to this? The TikTok ban. There's maybe border. There's a Lend-Lease Act. There's it's like a lot. Some of the stuff I like. Some of the stuff I like actually. But it's just like it's a weird mishmash. What's the sense from the Democrats on that?
I think this one's the wild card because I hung out with our friends at Way Too Early this morning, filling in for our friend John Lemire. Yeah. We had Jake Auchincloss on, who is a national security-minded Democrat, obviously a former Marine, or a Marine himself. He never stopped being a Marine. And he was excited about the TikTok component of this. He was excited about the fact that Senator Maria Cantwell seemed on board with the fact that her version of this bill was in it. That might make it a sweetener over on the Senate side. But then the hang up, of course, is something like the border provision, because Democrats want to be careful about what this actually is. And if Republicans, again, speaks to the lack of trust, if Republicans are trying to sneak something in here, that's going to be the real wild card, that fourth bill that sort of has the potpourri of issues of the day in it. Because I think at the end of it, there's probably more things that Democrats want to vote for in that than against. But one bad thing could outweigh all of the pretty good things. And that's the balancing act that we're watching play out here. Because frankly, the other three bills, the Ukraine, the Israel, and the Indo-Pacific bills, are basically the same as what they were in the Senate supplemental, except for like this loan forgiveness piece in the Ukraine thing that says you can't forgive the loan that we're giving Ukraine until after like mid-November of this year or something.
Okay, I lied. One last really quick question for those of us that are not following the rule, like that don't understand the parliamentary procedure as well. So do all four need to pass then to get to Senate? Or what would happen if they passed 3 and then that one failed?
So this is actually, I think, one of the things that we do not yet know. In theory, all 4 of these bills are under the umbrella of that. Actually, maybe we don't know this. I thought all 4 of these bills were under the same umbrella as, each other.
Right.
Which means that they're governed under the same rule.
Right.
But then there was talk about separating the border to be its own rule and its own vote. So I actually don't know how we're going to see this play out. I think maybe because it's still being figured out. And also, I think they're watching the Rules Committee right now pretty closely to see how that actually goes.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Ali Vitali, thank you so much. Come back soon. You're the best.
I will. Thanks, my favorite contributor.
I appreciate you.